All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Chocolate Chat brought to you by The Persistent Rumor. My name is Chocolate Yoda, spelled Y-O-D-D-A-H, because film studios are litigious. And with me is an international cast of characters that I am so looking forward to talking to. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff, men, women, relationships, identity issues, whatever. And, you know, it could get ugly. There could be blood. We don't know. That's just it. Anything can happen. So let's start with Janelle. Janelle, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Janelle Manton. I've been a coach for the last 15 years. I'm also a trainer. I'm really passionate about, I ultimately want to change the world one person at a time, but aspiring author, and mostly I guess, passionate about changing women's attitude around aging and being youthful. And yeah, that's where I'll stand.
Excellent, excellent. And rounding out the Aussie corner, Karen.
I'm Karen Lyons. Lovely to meet whoever's watching. Janelle and I have a very similar background. So mother, grandmother, sexy, sassy, sensational woman. Let's not forget that. Background in entertainment, in fitness, coach, quite a few things actually, varied, colourful, and quite a vast array of life experiences in general, and passionate about uplifting and empowering people and having more open, raw conversations. I think we all need to have, I feel that we all need to have more open, raw conversations.
All right, excellent. Laura, rock and roll.
Sure. I'm Laura Rice, native Chicagoan, but have spent a lot of time, almost 20 years in New York City. I miss it dearly. I am a recovering university administrator and a recovering arts administrator who now has a podcast and radio show for full-figured women entitled Full Body Frequency.
Excellent, excellent. Diane, my old high school chum.
Hi, I'm Diane Salyer. I am an inventory manager at a furniture delivery place. I am a mom of a daughter and a transgender son. I'm a grandmother-to-be, which I'm excited. The first one is due in June, little boy. And I'm excited to be here and see what happens.
Excellent. And I was saying this earlier, but Diane and I went to school together, and it has literally, we became friends on Facebook a while ago, but this is the first time in 39 years that we've actually seen each other and talked to each other. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
And rounding out the cast of characters is my brother from another mother, my brother in broadcasting over at Street News Now, which we do weekly live. Dr. Ron Ford, tell us all about you, sir.
Well, I too am a radio host. Each and every week I do a show called Ask Dr. Ron. And I also do the show that we share, Street News Now, Five Guys and You. I think that's the name of it now. But, you know, retired, been around the world a few times, you know, and I try and bring my witty humor to every conversation that I have. So I'm looking forward to being here this evening, and I hope everybody can and gather something from what we're talking about.
Yeah. Now, you humbly left out how long you've been in broadcasting. Why don't you let everybody know?
Oh, my God. Well, let's start with, I've been in the entertainment industry for over 45 years, and I have been doing talk radio for the past 10.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, thank you all for those introductions. And let's start with the first question. All right. I really am an instigator. Is happy wife, happy life real? Ladies, what's your perspective on that? By the way, who's married? I think, Diane, you might be the only married one. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay.
What does that mean to you, happy wife, happy life? And then I'll tell you what it means to me.
I think it's too one-sided, because I've been on the other side where if the husband was happy, then I could actually breathe with my ex. So I felt if I kept him happy, then I could actually be happy because then he was off my ass. But in the relationship I'm in now, which is a healthy one, I think it goes both ways. Like what makes him happy is in my head, and what makes, you know, me happy is in his head. So it's those little things of like, you're in a store, what is she like? What is he like? Let me get this. He might need, it's got to be both ways. It can't always be pleasing one person.
Right.
Then, you know, it's not going to work. It's going to always feel like it always felt lopsided to me with my ex.
Right. And it is interesting because I agree with you. It seems like in society at large, they don't share the same view that you have. It really is a one-sided equation. Yeah. Any other ladies want to chime in on that?
Well, I agree with Diane that it's reciprocal in the sense that I look at younger generation coming through now, and a lot of those young girls have what I would deem a very princess attitude towards their rights, their expectations. I'm generalizing, of course, not everybody. I find that quite sad that it's all about me. It's all about me, and they're already being put into a box, and the expectation, they're putting guys into this box of expectation, you know, how the relationship should be, what sort of materialistic gifts should be provided, how they should be proposed to, what the wedding should look like. I think that's an enormous amount of pressure for anybody. Yeah. Anybody.
And so it sounds like you're talking about a sense of entitlement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the word. So I think that I feel that if both parties are giving equally, whatever that is, that, you know, the woman is feeling supported and the man is feeling appreciated, which we've talked about before, which I feel is quite fundamental in a healthy relationship, then I think that's a dynamic to feed and fertilize.
I have a 21-year-old son, and I agree with Karen. There's a lot of pressure on young men to fulfill these unreal expectations. And he's like, well, I'm only starting out. I'm only working part-time. I'm still deciding what I want to do. And he's almost afraid, I wouldn't say afraid to date, but there's, you know, I can't afford to pay for these expensive dates and all these sort of things. So there is this unrealistic expectation. But moving forward though into marriage, like my first thought when you read that question out was absolutely yes. But in as everybody has said, but with the expectation of, not even expectation, but that it's reciprocated, that you're both not being complacent and putting effort in, and, you know, always being mindful of each other and what they need. And, you know, sometimes you kind of don't always get it right, but that's the common goal, is to not be pleasing each other, but finding happiness in the middle.
Right. Okay. And Laura?
I think it's a two-way street. You're in a relationship. You're not by yourself. It's not my relationship. It's a relationship. So I think Diane's right. I think that there has to be a balance. You have to think of your partner. Your partner needs to think of you. Otherwise, I don't think it works at all.
So Ron, from the male perspective, what does that phrase mean to you?
Before I answer that, can I ask the question of the panel? The panel being split with 2 women from America and 2 women from another country, do you think that from Australia that they would approach that same question and dynamics the same as they would from America?
I don't know. So far, they all kind of have. So
it's interesting because I think with other topics there would be a degree of difference, absolutely. With this one, I have to say that probably there might be, because we do have a large component, sorry, Aussie guys, we do have a large component of men who are extremely laid back, and downtime is still kind of the guys over at the barbecue cooking and the women over here chatting. And so I have to be honest and say they're probably a little bit lackadaisical in thinking about the needs of their partner generally. You know, they can get a nudge and be okay with that. It's like, oh, yeah. But you could be right. There could be a difference between countries. Yes.
Right. Yeah, but we actually haven't identified it yet, because you were talking about men and the question was about the difference between women. And so far you kind of all agreed on that answer. You know, your perspectives were very similar. Yeah. You know, I tend to think that countries don't really make that much difference between male and female attitudes. Oh, Laura disappeared. So Ron, now that you've asked that question, what's your feedback?
Well, I think that men approach the situation where as long as they can keep their significant other in a happy place, then it's going to make their life less, you know, turmoil. Okay. So, and that would be the mentality is like, hey, if they've got to take a hit, you know, and not make, you know, make their normal, whatever, Saturday night, you know, pool night or whatever, I'm gonna give that up for us, honey, you know, to make sure that she's pleased over the fact that he's sitting at home, you know, popping popcorn, you know, and sitting there watching Lifetime, you know, so because that's going to make her happy, you know. So, you know, to in general, I would have to say, yeah, whatever you can do to make her happy is going to, in the long run, pay off and make for a peaceful day, week, month. You know, well, month might be stretching it, but at least, you know, you might get a couple of days, you know, up to a week of peace out of it, you know.
Yeah. All right, interesting. Well, I actually have a different perspective from everybody. Mm-hmm. That phrase is absolutely ridiculous to me, and here's why. Because that phrase assumes that a woman's happiness is coming from a man. And there is nothing in that phrase that acknowledges where the man's happiness is coming from, right?
Not at all.
So and the fact is okay, her happiness in that scenario, her happiness is coming from me. And then my happiness also has to come from me. So now I got to do double duty. And this also feeds into that sense of entitlement that I find in general women do have. Like in the case that Karen mentioned, the idea of expense, right? In America, because of De Beers, the idea is that you're supposed to spend 2 or 3 months of your salary on an engagement ring. And I have seen and seen this happen and heard women talk about this, that if there's no engagement ring, it's not real and all this other stuff. That puts a tremendous amount of pressure on men, right? And I've seen women that were willing to end a relationship just because the guy couldn't afford a ring. And I find that to be extremely shallow. You know, women accuse men of being shallow, but I see the same shallowness on the side of women all the time. But let me finish out this thought. So think about, women have always said this. My whole life, I've heard women say, I can tell if I'm going to have sex with a guy in the first 30 seconds that I meet him. Any women have heard that before?
No. Have you?
You've never heard it before?
No, not really.
No?
I've actually said it.
You've said it. Okay. My whole life, I have heard women say that. Okay. That proves to me that you're just as shallow as we are, because that can only be based on appearance. Okay. Because
No, it's also based on your connection to that person.
In 30 seconds,
literally
in 30 seconds, you've got a connection to that person.
Chocolate Yoda. It's
Let's be real.
Not 30
Let's be
seconds.
real about this.
It's
Is that
not
in 30 seconds?
You know very quickly. Women know very quickly.
Okay, right. And based on what? What do you know in 30 seconds?
Based on the connection. Based on if you want to screw them.
Based on what is that based on?
That's just based on if you're attracted to him.
Right.
Wait a minute, but attraction is more than just a person's looks.
Right.
It's also what comes out of their mouth, how you feel when you're around them. And there are a number of factors.
Right. In a whole 30 seconds, you get all that.
Not 30 seconds.
But that was my question. That's what I've heard my whole life. I can tell if I'm going to have sex with a guy in 30 seconds. I have heard women say this for as long as I can remember. And you said it too. So don't back up now.
No, but it is an exaggeration.
Oh,
it's hyperbole.
Okay. Suddenly it's an exaggeration.
That's what it is. It's not literally 30 seconds.
Fair enough.
But wait a minute. Before we go that way, can we go back to happy wife, happy life?
Sure.
Right.
Because what it says, it's not that the woman will be happy. Well, she's happy, but you'll also be happy keeping her happy.
Mm.
You know, she'll be happy and you'll be happy. So it's not just a one-sided thing. You make her happy. And I think my reading into it is you make her happy, she makes you happy.
Ron, how many men do you know that are living in that reality?
Not too many, but going back to that same point, you said the question was happy wife, not a happy engagement or
no, I know, but we broadened out.
Yeah, because you know you were saying
an example of pressure on men. That's where the engagement thing came in.
Yeah. Because you know, once you're married, you done already bought the farm. Okay, you're stuck. Right. Yeah. You know, because you know, just like one of the musicians said, it's cheaper.
You're not stuck.
It's cheaper to keep her. Okay, you know, like, look, if you
I've got 2 divorces under my belt.
But it cost you money to get rid of them, didn't it? You know,
not much.
Okay,
I was happy to pay it.
There you go, and that's what makes us happy when we get out of something that we ain't happy in. Okay?
What about her? Maybe she's happy as well.
Yeah,
maybe they didn't seem happy, but you know, you know my life better than I do.
And I will never have that discussion. Because I really don't give a damn whether she's happy after I'm gone or not. Right. You know?
And let's keep in mind that 68% of divorces are initiated by women.
There you go. For whatever reason.
Going back to happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
Can I say that if, can I please ask, is a man primarily fueled by regular sex to keep a happy wife? Is that the underlying motivation? I'm not saying that there aren't other factors.
I'm not clear on the question. So maybe ask it a different way.
Earlier, Ron was talking about, you know, keeping the woman happy makes his life easier, or the man's life easier for a period of time. I accept that, and I'm listening to that, and I'm asking if under those layers, is that primarily fueled by having regular sex? The hope of regular sex being actually put on the menu by keeping the wife happy?
No, or that's what he got a girlfriend for.
We're not helping, Ron.
Don't expect him to be helpful, please.
This is why Ron is here. He's an agent of chaos.
Lower your expectations.
Your question is more clear to me now, and I can answer it. It's twofold. While I believe that regular sex is the foundation of all men's motivations with regard to their significant other, it's stopping nagging. That's our other goal. Please leave me alone. Please stop bothering me. Please stop asking me to do everything on my day off. That's part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep women from bothering us. Because here's the thing, and if no one's told you this before, I'm happy to let you know. Most men don't like most women, and that's okay. Just the same way lions and tigers don't hang out together, we're different. Guys like to hang out with guys. Women tend to like to hang out with other women. It makes perfect sense. Women don't tend to like men that much. You know, you can tell by how they talk about men when they're in relationships. Oh, my husband.
Janelle and I are going to dispute this.
You can if you want. I'm only talking about my experience. So your experience could be different, and it's just as valuable. In my experience, my whole life growing up, watching the way wives talk to their husbands and talked about their husbands, it was clear that they didn't like and at times respect their husband. Okay, that's what I saw growing up, and I warn every woman that I get into a relationship with that I will not live in that paradigm, especially if you get married, because every wedding I've ever been to, the word honor was part of the vows. And when you're out, when I see people married and the woman is going, my husband's an asshole. Well, she ain't honoring him, and it has consequences to treat men like that. And as we talked about on the first session, and you and I, Karen, talked in our podcast, men are like everybody else. They want to be valued. They want to be respected. They want to be treated well. And very often we don't get that, and again, I presume that Aussie television is similar to American television. Think about how husbands are portrayed on television. They're just idiots mostly, right? They're talked about like they're worthless, like they're just, that like the woman is put upon and tolerating the guy, and guess what? On the other side of that equation, there's a guy that's going, yeah, I need to get out of this.
Yeah. For me personally, I mean, obviously everyone filters it through their belief system. For me personally, I resonate more with the respect factor than the honor factor. To me, when someone talks about honoring the other person in a relationship, to me that almost feels binding, or as in suffocatingly binding. It's all in the terminology. But if someone was to say to me, it's paramount that we show each other a certain percentage of respect, or a high level of respect, particularly when we're outside of the home, that I can completely understand. But honor feels like it was meant to be sort of 200 years ago to me. But respect, I completely agree with.
Okay. I mean, honor works for me. And like I said, I've heard it in literally every wedding that I've ever been to. That's part of the vows.
It's strange now in the relationship that I'm in. I agree with you when I hear women talking about their husbands calling them assholes or this or that. I'm not in that relationship anymore, because I feel more like on the men's side in this part of the conversation, because my ex acted like I always felt like we reversed roles. That's how it felt like in that relationship. But now, I talk about my husband. I'm like, I love him. I've been with him since 2006. And, I respect him. And I'm almost like an anomaly at this point. And they're like trashing their husbands or boyfriends or exes and stuff. And I'm like, and they look at me like I have two heads. I'm like, what, actually loving someone and respecting them, and just because I've been with them for 14, 15 years, I shouldn't anymore?
Right.
It's strange. So I just go, you're weird. I love him and I'm good. Yeah. Like I should be crashing him.
Janelle's waving. Go ahead, Janelle.
No, I grew up with my parents not respecting each other, and especially my mum giving my dad hell. And then when he was finally kicked out of the house, then talking about him and growing up not thinking that he was a good person and not really being able to have the kind of relationship with him that I deserved. And that's one thing when I think my husband and I broke up, that we were really careful about, just making sure that we didn't dishonor each other in front of the kids. Now, surely now that my kids are adults, we have an opinion and they understand those opinions. But moving into relationships, like I think that honor part is a huge part, like call it respect or honoring them, but you go into it with wanting to hold that person in a high regard, I think, like, and the effort is to daily contribute to that. And sure, we kind of fall off the wagon a little bit every now and then and lose our way, but I think to keep a relationship going, you have to put that effort in all the time. And I've run women's retreats, and one of the rules were you cannot, this is not a men bagging, you know, you cannot put men down. We only honor men in these circumstances, because we've got to understand the responsibility that we have in maybe having him act the way he does anyway. So I don't know, hopefully I'm raising my son and my daughter to find some balance with you know, the experiences that I've had and then subjected them to.
Yeah. So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the ladies, do you think the family values are the same in Australia as they are in America?
Well,
in what regard though? Like I mean,
yeah, it's a broad
is that such
question.
a broad term? Yeah.
Well, I mean, just general family values. Like Diane is saying how she's so much in a better place than what she was previously, you know, so she was able to find someone that was more on the same value principles that she's on, and she's happy with that. So, you know, as far as the makeup of a family, like you were just saying, Janelle, that you witnessed, you know, your dad being somebody that you did not admire, you know, as a young person. So did that affect what you would accept or not accept going forward in your life, what you want for yourself? You know, like you said just now, you want to make sure your children see a positive situation versus, you know, not really dealing with, you know, the negativity that you witness. So that's a value line, you know, definitely. What you've seen when you're coming up, what you've been exposed to, and what you try to, you know, establish for yourself going forward with what you would like to see them have for themselves. Because eventually what happens is what we see was imparted into us, and you try to reverse that, what you impart into them. So I know America has a moral compass that's probably in the negatives, you know, as far as what's exposed, especially family. Family is not a very rare thing anymore. You know, it's not unusual to see single parents, families, whether it be male or female, because males are raising their children nowadays more than it used to be. So, but the moral compass in America is extremely in the negative. So would you say that in Australia, that the moral compass is in the negative as well, as far as family values?
To a degree, yes. I think the biggest challenge I had was that my mum was the problem, not my dad. Mm-hmm. My dad, while he was a happy, you know, alcoholic and gambler, he was a good, gentle person. My mum was the aggressor. And she was the one that, I guess, if anything, taught me the biggest lessons of who not to become, like, because of her own insecurities and because of who she was. They had definitely a values conflict, which I have tried to correct. But unfortunately for me, it was sort of in hindsight. I didn't realize when I married, when I was only 24, that I was taking some values into that relationship that included me not being healed, me not taking responsibility for my upbringing or how what I was thinking and feeling about it. I brought insecurities into that. I didn't start learning about myself until I was probably in my 30s. And I mean, I've always been a seeker, but the big and the hard work came when I decided to leave my husband, because our values were different, and amongst many other things. And I chose me instead of, you know, that, you know, because of those major differences. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to bring my kids up with the kind of arguments that my parents had. So yeah, I guess every relationship is balancing out the next, isn't it?
And I think generally in Australia, we, similar to America, you know, there's a bit of, seem to be quite sort of creeping towards an epidemic of broken families. But what I've really noticed in the last decade, and, you know, anyone can chime in on this, particularly you, Janelle, what I've actually noticed is that we're still having broken families, but there are a lot more proactive, positive, blended families. And there's a lot more opportunity for healing. And there's I'm finding a lot of less conflict. I can use one family member as an example, and he has 2 children, and he's now with someone who has 2 children, and those 2 children still see their biological father, and everybody chats and they do what's best for the kids, but they genuinely are healing and moving forward as a team with the family unit. So I'm seeing a lot more of that, which is amazing. And I'm seeing a lot more of less of the blame game and more of people evolving and stepping up, going, okay, I'm accountable for this. They may not have seen it at the time, but later they're working out where they've been accountable or responsible, and they are actually trying to make amends. You know, whether someone's going to maintain a friendship with someone after they've broken up or not is so personal. You know, some people know, clear cut, done, dusted. But I'm not noticing as much of that, what I call negative bagging conversation where, I mean, I've had a couple of people do it to me with my previous husband, and I've just been nipping it in the bud and saying, look, those things happened, but you're weighing in on that and not remembering the 16 years of all of these positives. And at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all fucked up. We're all doing the best that we possibly can. And, you know, he and I are slowly building the bridge of communication again. Are we ever going to be great mates? I don't know. But the fact that the healing and that we're prepared to do it, I just see that people's attitudes here are changing enormously.
Interesting. I see family values as mostly propaganda. Because when you look at the statistics about, you know, who's doing damage to whom, it's usually family members hurting other family members. You know, when you look at rape and sexual assault statistics, it's, you know, it's coming from the family. All this dysfunction that people refer to generally stems from family dynamics. The other thought I had was regarding something Diane said and something that Janelle said. And it was with regard to, in Diane's case, your first husband, and in Janelle's case, your father. It sounded like some of the conflict that existed there was because there were not strong men. That they, you know, you even said, Diane, that the roles were reversed, right? And I think that is such a big factor. A lot of times when men talk to me about their relationships, where it's failing very often is the man is not fulfilling his role. And when I talk about roles, I don't talk about the roles that society kind of made up in terms of what people are supposed to do. I'm talking about the roles that are baked into our DNA. You know, the way, you know, what we are. Forget about who we are as individuals and personalities, what we are as mammals. There are roles baked into that. And very often guys fail because they don't fulfill that role. They're not representing strength in a healthy way. They're not representing leadership in a healthy way. And you can see it. You can see in the behavior of the women that they're with that it's almost always reflected in how, and women tend to get more aggressive in that situation. They tend to be disappointed in that situation. And again, 68% of all divorces are generated by women. And when I drill down into those stories, it's usually a guy that's not doing the right thing.
Yep. So what you're trying to say is when a guy approaches the situation, he's out with the guys, and the first thing that comes out his mouth is, she won't let me be the man in the relationship.
He's already lost. I'm sorry, say it again, Laura?
I'm saying, can we step back just a little bit?
Sure.
And go back to your 30 seconds on I'll know if I'll sleep with him. Here's the deal about relationships. You pretty much already know who the person is before you marry them. You know if you're on the same page with them, their values, etc. I've never been married, but I've been proposed to twice. And I dodged 2 bullets because I knew the heart of it all. There was no way that I was on the same page with these guys. Just no way. And I knew that within a few years, if I married either one of them, we would have been divorced. And sometimes you stay in relationships for a myriad of reasons. But I think, and I asked my mom this because my parents were divorced. And I said, Mom, were you all even friends? She says, no. And we should have been, and we weren't. And they were on two different pages. And their value systems were slightly different. They grew up very differently. And because of that, there was a lot of clashing. There was the whole debate, Booker T. Washington versus W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, in terms of the philosophies of all sorts of things, political, economic, you name it. Religious. My father was Catholic. My mother was not. She was AME Zion, African Methodist Episcopal Zion. So just my mother grew up in Mississippi, went to boarding school in Poughkeepsie, New York. My father grew up on the south side of Chicago. Very different lives. But I understand that when you get into relationships, or even when you're talking with somebody, you kind of have an inkling that something might go left. You know, I mean, there's this guy that I'm talking to now, and he said something really bizarre. And I thought we were really on the same page, but he said, we don't even know if masks work. I was like, oh God, it's over. It's over before it's begun.
Test failed. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Do you want to get married?
Yes and no. Yes, because of companionship and knowing that there's a possibility of someone making decisions on my behalf that's not my younger or my older brother, you know?
Are you worried that your older brother will be like, yank the cord like it's...
There's a good possibility that could happen. But you know, the companionship, I see my younger brother and his wife, and they have a family, and obviously I'm not having any children, but the kind of companionship, camaraderie, you're on the same mission, you know, you've got some of the same goals, but you both are growing into your own lives, but you have a life together. I think that looks really attractive to me, you know, really attractive. So eventually maybe I will.
Right.
But I do know that I want peace in my house. I don't want to be in a space where he's upset, I'm upset, we're clashing all the time. And I know that if I'd married one of those guys, it would have been like that.
Right. Now, have you ever proposed to a guy?
I have not.
Would you ever do that?
I don't know. I don't think I would, but who knows?
I'm not at why more women place. Don't. That's kind of, I wonder why more women don't propose to men.
I did.
You do? Why?
I did. So my second husband, we went out to dinner, and it was a leap year, and I proposed to him, and I presented him with a plain band that was engraved, and he actually always wore 2 rings on his left finger. So one was his engagement ring and one was his wedding band.
Oh, nice. Interesting.
And he took my surname. So there's an interesting twist. So I don't know about in the States, but legally you can do that here. It doesn't happen that often, but it's legal to do that. So I always laughed that I brought him up the food chain because his surname was Fisher and I'm a Lyons.
I love it.
But he actually made that decision because he didn't like hyphenated surnames. I didn't mind. I was happy to hyphenate my surname. And he was like, no. And then the next morning he said to me, I've actually got the solution. And I said, what's that? And he said, I'll take your surname. And interestingly enough, his father was really supportive and his mother was mortified.
Interesting.
So everybody on the panel believes in the institution of marriage?
Well, that's an interesting question. So now here's the thing. It's a construct. There's nothing real about it, right? You can choose it, and that's fine. It's a fine choice. It's a word, you know, if it means something to you, do it. But we have to appreciate the fact that there's no inherent meaning to it, and there's no magic to it. You know, I tell the story of this woman that I dated for only a month and a half. And the reason why, and by the way, this was after 5 years of knowing her and loving her as a person. And once we got together, the woman that I knew disappeared and was replaced by this psychopath who could only talk about marriage all the time. And when I asked her why, she said marriage means commitment. And I said, no, it doesn't. Commitment means commitment. If marriage meant commitment, there would never be divorces. It's not magical. It's if you want to get down to brass tacks on what marriage actually is in America, it's a tax status. It has nothing to do with relationships. It's got nothing to do with human behavior. It's just a legal quasi-religious thing. And again, if the part about marriage is about fulfilling your needs in a relationship, have at it. Makes perfect sense. But let's not pretend that it has some inherent magical quality that binds people together forever, because clearly it doesn't.
In fact, Guy and I got together in 2006, but we didn't get married until 2012. And the only reason we got married, because I was under my ex's health insurance, because he paid nothing for it. He was with the police department. So I was like,
right.
Hey. And then I found out when we got legally separated, I should have been off of it. So that was 6 years, and I was freaking out going, oh my God, do I have to repay everything now? So we got legally divorced after the judge found the paperwork. And 4 months later, and it was like, all right, so we just rushed to get married so I could get under Guy's health insurance. Because my place, it was ridiculously high for what I was going to pay. But that's the only reason. I mean, it was just for the legalities of it, to get onto health insurance and all that. And, you know, the house and everything with him being with his name and everything. But without even being married, we'd still be together. I don't need a piece of paper or somebody saying, you know, here's the stamp, you can stay together. We still, you know, I still had free health insurance with Max. We'd still be, you know, we wouldn't be married. I'd still be just legally separated.
Gotcha. And I want to take a pause here. Number one, I don't want to read any more text. Number two, Laura has now proposed to me.
And Dr. Ron.
Oh, and Dr. Ron too? All right.
Yeah, she's trying to hedge her bet, you know. And my response,
Ron's local. I think you're better off with Ron.
Yeah, I gave her the Heisman stiff arm. You can't handle me.
That's funny.
Yeah. You know.
All right. So just for the record, that was question one.
Wow.
And I don't really, I have some questions here. Here's something that's on my mind because we started talking about gender roles, which also leads into gender identities and stuff. And I want to hear from Diane on this, being that you have a trans child. What do you want to share about that? What do you want people to know about that situation?
It makes me sad because my son came out to us, it's 6 years ago. And all those pieces of the puzzle kind of came together over from when he was an infant. When you got a little girl that can pee and hit the wall, and I'm going, wait a minute, like the anatomy didn't fit what just happened. And there's like all these little clues spaced out. So when he came out to me, he was still afraid of acceptance, I was like, you know, I love you. I don't care if fruit pops out of the top of your head. You're still my son, you know, you're still my child.
Right.
But he has transgender friends and families that do not accept them, that kick them out on the street and I don't understand that. Like, all I do is love him. Yeah. I'm like, I don't care what is going on.
There's those family values rearing their heads once again.
Yeah, when both my children were born, all I said is, I want you healthy and happy. Right. That's my expectations for you.
Right.
And that's what I want him to be. I mean, it's a rough road. He suffers from depression, clinical depression. still has ADHD, has the body dysmorphia thing, and still working on, you know, doing surgeries, like what do we do, what are we not doing, but he's taking his time, which is awesome, because don't rush in and get things cut up and lopped off, make your decisions.
Right. And how old is he?
He's 26.
Okay.
So, you know, there's, you know, do you take testosterone? Do you not take T? You know, do you want a family? Because, put it this way, he's with a black man and you're transgender, you're not adopting. It just the way society is, you know, unless you're a white couple that have $1 million, you're not going to get a baby. Mm-hmm. So you have working mechanisms that you could have a baby if you choose to. Mm. So, I mean, there's a lot of discussions about it. And I just wish people accepted people for how they are. Like, you know, for the longest time, his one manager when he worked at McDonald's was like, well, I'm calling you she, because that's what you are. Mm. You know, misgendering, dead naming, it's just, you know, his birth name was Casey. Yeah. It's not anymore. Right. And I switched to Chase quite quickly, and it's those little things, and it's hard to see him get destroyed every now and then by people that are just cruel. Yeah. They look and go, no, you're a female, and that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And that's not, it's horrible when people do that. If you misgender, that's different. You're like, oh goodness, I'm sorry, I didn't know. He doesn't get offended, but when you do it on purpose, that's just cruel. Yeah.
And I find it a very challenging area of the human dynamic. I look at it this way. If someone I know decides that they are now another gender and they want me to call them by a different name, that's not a problem. I'll happily do that. But I wonder where the responsibility lies to maintain the identity. I think it's with the individual. I don't necessarily think that I have to participate. I don't think I would be cruel about it or insensitive about it, but let's put it in another context. There's this thing in psychology called the Christ complex. And, you know, insane asylums, for lack of a better word, are filled with people that have this complex. They think there's someone that they're not. And, you know, I am not responsible if I meet someone like that to call them Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, you know, and I mean, I guess I could call them Jesus, but I don't have to pretend that they really are Jesus. So I go back and forth with this because I believe in supporting everyone for everything. Equal rights across the board, whatever you want to be, whatever you want to do, whoever you want to love, whatever your identity is. I just struggle with how much I have to participate in somebody else's identity.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right?
It's a tough one. It's respecting people who they are. Like if I had a girlfriend, her name was Catherine, and then people would just go Kathy, but she introduced herself as Catherine.
Right. That's a pet peeve of mine, by the way.
Yes.
People do that to me. I'm go in my real life, and people, you know, want to change it to.
Yeah, and you're like,
what?
Yeah, like. I'm introducing myself, and this is what I assume to be called.
Yeah.
And
don't come to Australia then. We bastardize everybody's name.
Yeah.
It's true. We shorten everyone's name, and if we can't shorten it, we add to it. like my youngest son, his name is Brock, and I thought I'm safe, other than the fact that we have a racing car driver here who was very well known. I thought I'm safe. But no, he got Brocky, broccoli, on it went.
And see, I don't have a problem with that when there is a relationship. But if I introduce myself to you for the first time, Just refer to me to what I said. If we develop a relationship later, absolutely, you can give me a nickname, especially if you're facilitating orgasms for me. I'm all for that.
Amen. 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 But but to that point is like what Diane is saying, what a person identifies themselves as, that's what you know them to be. You don't know anything else about them.
Right.
And until something else has been, determined, then you have to go with what they are allowing or introducing themselves. Like you said, you got a problem calling them Jesus. Well, in Hispanic culture, Jesus is a common name.
Yeah.
So he might not be talking about Jesus that died on the cross. He might be talking about, I'm named after my uncle Jesus up the road.
Well, that's actually my uncle's nickname.
Okay.
I don't call him Jesus. I call him Uncle Jay.
There you go. See, now you shorten his name.
That's
but
right.
It's okay. You got a relationship with him. He's your uncle.
Yeah.
But I think people have identity problems anyway.
Yeah.
And that's if we are so-called quote unquote normal. Okay. Even if we are considered by the definition or your definition or her definition of normal, then we have a problem with identity anyway. Okay. So we have to try and figure out a way to communicate and fit in where we can.
Yeah. Where do you think that problem comes from of identity? Because I don't even like the word normal. I like to use the word common, but I get where you're coming from.
I use air quotes on that.
Yeah, but in the sense of we all have challenges with identity, which I agree with, where do you think that comes from?
I think it's more society, because we all want to fit in somewhere.
Right.
It's just like in the jungle, zebras hang out with zebras. Okay. Even though they may be part of the horse family, the zebras hang together. They don't go hanging out with the, mule deer up the street. They don't do that. So, it's easy to identify them because they have stripes. So as human beings, we often don't know who we most easily identify with because we don't wear stripes on the outside.
Right.
So we have to communicate and figure out whether we fit in or not. And we try to herd ourselves into where we're most comfortable, you know?
Yeah, so, I know myself. I identify.
Oh, she got a hand up. She got a hand up.
Yeah, no, we'll get to Janelle in a moment. I identify with sexually aggressive women with low standards.
Well, I can raise my hand on that one too. Like, hey,
And speaking of self-identified sexually aggressive women, what do you want to say, Janelle?
Well, I actually want to ask you, I'm going to say something totally different, but I want to ask you, what do you identify as being sexually aggressive woman? Like, what does that mean? Because I've been told that.
Yeah, it's technically not aggressive. Aggression is not good, but sexually assertive women. Meaning, for me, it's women that have stripped away all the hang-ups that society has piled on them for their whole friggin' lives.
So why is it that women get called, because they're assertive and ask for what they want, why is it that they get cloned aggressive? And I got accused of that when I left my husband, and that was nearly 20 years ago. And it's still something I think about, and it's unfair. Because I initiated, because I was crying out for affection, any kind of attention would have been nice. But I was cloned aggressive in that. And I have since been also not even that long ago. And I'm like, wow, that's not fair. I'm just being assertive and asking for what I want.
I think it's interesting. It's interesting to me that a lot of the stories that the women are relating about their exes, it seems to be very consistent that you were dealing with weak men. That's what it sounds like to me.
You know, the interesting thing is like this whole conversation has kind of come around in circles for me, because we talked about my father being like, you know, he was an alcoholic, he was gambling. And no, he wasn't a strong man. He never stood up to my mum, really. He never, ever raised a hand to me. And I've only recently had some some stuff that I've processed around that. But then I married a man who was the most opposite. He was a military man with like values and control, and I felt secure and safe around him. And I think that there's my, you know, insecurities around my father, them being duplicated, like recovered, if you like, in the relationship with my husband, realizing that then that was kind of too much on the flip side, because the weakness then that he showed was a lack of emotional and physical connection, because it was so rigid about everything else. So then I'm like, okay, where do I go to next? Finding the real balance for me. But yeah.
Yeah, Janelle and I are identical with that. The same deal. I grew up with an alcoholic father, I could see he'd actually been a really strong person, had made some really strong choices, but he'd lost so many parts of himself, like steam from a kettle. Like he was just, you know, vaporized, really. And then I ended up marrying a guy in the military, very structured, same deal, because it made me feel safe. Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ron, you wanted to say something earlier? Go ahead.
Yes, my church finger. Yeah. See, first of all, I wanna, you know, say to Janelle, being an aggressive female is not a bad character trait. Okay. I personally think it's a very strong character trait, you know. So if someone, you know, if I approach you and say you're a very aggressive female, that's a compliment. That's not something that I'm saying as a derogative or a negative. You know, I would tell a prostitute that her profession is a very honorable profession. You know, it's not necessarily a negative. She provides a service that is very badly needed. You know, so why should somebody get a girlfriend or get married in order to get an orgasm? Okay. Seriously speaking. Okay. And in some states it's legal. Well, only one state, Vegas, it's legal. Okay. So, I mean, if you got the money and the airplane ticket, you can go get your needs taken care of. But I don't think for number one, it should be illegal in all 50 states in the United States. But being a person that is not afraid of who they are and what they want is not a negative. Okay. And anybody that made you feel that way, shame on them. Okay.
I agree. Shame on them.
But those are the constructs of society and these are the failings of society, where we make women ashamed for their sexuality. It's, I mean,
I applaud you.
But it's just the word aggressive. I mean, what do the other women think?
Yes.
I mean, I'd like to know what Laura, Kaz, and Diane think about that word aggressive. Like, why do I have to be aggressive?
And before we get to that, I want to just say something about prostitution. Because it is absurd that prostitution is illegal. And if you, let's break it down. And I can only represent America here because I don't know how it is in other countries. But if you have sex with your girlfriend for free, that's perfectly legal, right? If you offer your girlfriend money for it, then it becomes illegal. But there is a way to make that legal, and I'll get to that in a second. But here's what doesn't make sense to me. When you think about it, since you can have sex for free, then in a capitalist society, what the objection to in prostitution is the money. It's not the sex. But here's how you can make it legal. All you have to do is film it and call it pornography.
Yes.
And that's weird. That's weird that you can pay someone to have sex with them and film it, and now it's legal. If you don't, it's illegal.
I'm laughing at Laura just shaking her head at you. It's like
that's fine, but that's all true though. What I just said is literally all true.
No, yeah. I don't disagree with you about that, but I'm harkening back to the fact that aggressive women also know within 15 minutes or less whether or not they're going to have sex with a guy. So let's go back to 30 seconds or less. There's nothing wrong with that.
No one said there was.
who and
all I said is that makes women as shallow as men. That's it.
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
No doubt. No doubt.
Okay, so we can put the 30-second thing to rest now.
Wait a minute, and I'm gonna add even to that.
What's that?
You may even know you're not gonna enjoy it, but you still gonna do it.
No, that's not true. No. Okay, you all might do that, but
that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from a man's perspective.
Oh, well, that's from your perspective. Yeah,
a man could look at a woman and say, "I probably won't enjoy this, but I'm still gonna do it." You know. And in the morning, I'm gonna hate myself, you know, and I will not do it again. That's why they don't answer the phone call when you call them. Like, hey, when can we go again? Not.
So Ron, that reminds me, I also provide coaching services, and
yes, sir.
Might want to talk offline.
Yes, sir. No problem.
Hey, listen, the truth is the truth. And that's what this podcast is about, is talking about the truth of men and women and sex and sexual identity and all that stuff.
Yes.
So Janelle asked the other ladies to talk about, what was it? The aggressive woman part. So we've got Karen and Diane to hear from regarding that.
Well, I think Diane should go first. I've been verbal diarrhea.
I don't like the word aggressive either, because it just has that, society has that negative undertone for females, and it doesn't for men. If a man is aggressive, he's a go-getter, but if a woman is aggressive, it's like, jeez,
Right, but in the realm of interpersonal relationships, then aggressive men are having a lot of problems these days.
Yeah.
I don't like, some people, I'm a great patient advocate. If you were in the hospital, you want me there, because I will yell, scream, pull doctors over, tell them to do what they got to do. And that they look at as like, what's with you? I'm like, I'm a strong woman, get used to it. I will be nice and will be polite until the time comes for me not to be. And I've told my kids the same thing. I'm like, be polite until there's a time not to be.
Right. And
stand your ground. Because my mother raised me, if you're gonna start a fight, I'm kicking your ass. But if you walk away from a fight, I'm kicking your ass. So I was like, all right, so someone's kicking my ass. But I see being strong and opinionated as good, but aggressive for society's made it a bad undertone for women. And I don't know why. It just, most of the men who said I was aggressive have said it negatively.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you made the first move. Oh, my manhood, my ego. Like, your ego should be pumped up.
Yeah.
But the weaker men, I agree, take it as like, oh, I can't handle that because, oh, this woman actually has a brain.
Right. Well, here's the problem I find. It's not so much that there are men who are going to respond negatively to that. That's fine. That's the weeding out process that we all have to go through in life, right? The problem comes when women change themselves and are not who they really are and what they really are in order to placate some bullshit societal construct.
Yeah.
So I'm with the ladies on this one. I am not a fan of being called aggressive sexually. I'm a very liberated, open sexual person. I don't really have too many hang-ups. I'm really prepared to try anything that is going to be hedonistic and pleasurable. However, I find that in fling situations with just casual men, I find they tend to go, oh, I love how assertive you are, or they have said aggressive. In those situations, I still don't like the word. However, I've been accepting of it. But you can take those men or other men, and in a relationship, not so much. So the flings, enjoy it. The relationship, no, not so much. It wears thin. That has been my personal experience.
Right. So again, those are not the right men for you, because I'm with a woman who is very assertive sexually, and I love that about her, because I like strong women, always have, So we keep going back to societal norms and mores and things like that. What role do you think religion plays in shaping that? Because before I let you all answer, I'll give my perspective on it. In Genesis, in the Bible, there are very specific lessons taught. One is that knowledge is dangerous. One is that nudity is to be viewed as shameful. And of course, we learn that women are horrible, lying creatures, but no, maybe that's my own thing. But it is very clear that, like, you know, they make women the bad guy. They make Eve the villain in this. She tempts Adam, and, you know, because Adam is too dumb to go, no, I don't want to do what God told us not to do. You know, but she becomes the villain for that. Their quest for knowledge becomes vilified, and their nudity becomes shameful. And I tend to think that that has shaped so much of what we're talking about with regard to how society views what's okay for men and what's okay for women. Anybody else have any feedback on that?
If that was the template for that, Chocolate Yoda, then surely women being seen as aggressive or manipulating or whatever would be a positive, or women would see themselves as a positive, but that's clearly not the case.
Okay, so what do you think it is? Where do you think society's attitudes toward women come from?
Well, I don't think that that's a clear-cut answer. I think that some people are going to be influenced by their religious backgrounds. Other people are going to be influenced by their parents and the roles that they've played and how they... I look at my uncle and his adult children, and he's a doctor and he was married to a nurse, and they had a very liberated view on nudity and sex, and it was nothing to go to their place and find all the teenage kids at that time lying by the pool naked, sunbaking and talking and laughing. It was never a shameful thing at all. It was just, this is the human body, this is how it is. I think it depends on cultural backgrounds. I think that is such a deep question. I don't think there's a simplistic answer to that.
Well, I'm definitely not looking for simplistic answers, just answers. Okay, anybody else?
Let's start here, because it depends on what Bible you're speaking of. A number of books historically were taken out of the Bible. The Bible has been edited and transcribed so many ways and so many times by a number of men, but most of the books that were taken out of the original Bible were written by women. Jesus actually had disciples. So if you take it from a view where women have been erased from history, eliminated, their voices discarded, if you start from that point, then let's talk about the value of women. You know, but let's also talk about all of these. We're looking at the lens of women through a very Western specific sort of viewpoint. And I think that does damage to society. Everything can't be seen through one lens, you know?
Right.
And
well, the King James Version is the most popular version, and that's what you'll find a lot of people base their lives on. And America is predominantly Catholic / Christian, whatever you want to call it. So does anyone feel that the attitudes that are portrayed in the Bible toward women permeate society at all?
Absolutely. I grew up Catholic, and I've got to say that I've spent the better part of my adult life trying to unwind the conditioning that I spent my entire childhood being bombarded with. My primary school, all of my high school was in a Catholic girls' school, and that seriously impacted me and what I thought was shameful, what I should be guilty about. But the other thing is it actually had the opposite effect, because I was extremely promiscuous when I was young. So you hide from me and you keep secrets. I'm going to want to, like any kid, I'm going to want to, you know, discover that. myself. So my attitude with my own kids has been really open, really, you know, there's no discussion we can't have. And their attitude around sex is a lot different to what mine was, because I didn't have to learn the hard way, that whole, you know, we're not talking about it, and I mean, it's wrong and it's bad. Well, gosh, I've spent my life coaching women so they can feel normal about wanting a healthy sexual appetite.
Right. And what is your definition of promiscuous? Because that's another hot word that gets thrown at women. And I think errantly, it's like, to me, it's, again, women who like sex, but it's sort of, it has such a negative connotation.
It does. It does. Look, I guess I would have grown up thinking that I was promiscuous, but I would now probably rephrase it and say, oh, I just had a healthy appetite. Maybe sometimes, not always for the right reasons, though, when I was younger. Promiscuous, I think, you're right in having a slightly negative, but I slept with a lot of people and didn't really care about, you know, what that meant to me at the time when I was younger, especially. I think probably I was having sex to feel love and connection for the wrong reasons, you know, even though that was temporary. Like because I wasn't feeling it for myself,
like,
wasn't getting it somewhere else.
What's a wrong reason to want to feel love and connection?
Well, yeah. Well, if the reason why I'm having sex when I was younger was to feel love and connection, it's temporary when it's just a one-night stand, and it's the wrong vehicle to get true love and connection, or the need for that being met. Like, that would be in a more genuine, authentic relationship that actually had care and, you know, maybe commitment, or, you know, same values. But if we're just going out and shagging each other,
but, you know, I mean, temporary love and connection is not a bad thing. I've never had a one-night stand. That's not a positive or negative. It's just a fact. But I don't see the problem with that. Like, okay, you know, this is how we're designed, right? We're designed to bump into each other and rub against each other until something magical happens, right? So what is the problem? Why are there so many fucking layers on top of that have nothing to do with anything except made up bullshit?
That's a lens. And I think there's nothing wrong with having more than one lover at a time. I think there's nothing wrong with dating more than one person at a time. I mean, women are taught that you should be chaste. You should one man at a time, et cetera, et cetera. It's crazy. Why?
I agree.
You know?
And connection, I mean, I missed, sorry, Janelle, had to chuff, but I just think connection as a whole is so important, and we all crave physical connection. Yes, mental connection, emotional connection, but there are times when we just simply want to be held and have a really raunchy, free, wonderful, good time.
And so, Ron, before we get to you, let's talk to the only married person on the panel, Diane. So what's I know for myself that there's a paradigm shift when you're in a long-term relationship. I was married and with this woman for over 10 years. But I always had a healthy sexual appetite and a healthy sex life for the most part. Has anything changed for you? Are things different now? I mean, we're talking 15 years ago that you got together, right?
Yeah. Well, the poor man, I went into menopause at 36. So yeah, sex drive is beyond the toilet. But he knew this going in.
Right.
And but we have a really good relationship. Whereas I tell him, I said, if you menopausal brain, I don't think about it anymore. It's just genetically, it's just not there. But I've always said to him, I said, if you feel like not connected, you want some, I said, just, poke me on the shoulder going, excuse me. And I'm like, oh, I remember I like this. Like once it starts, I'm like, oh yeah. But
I'm so glad you said that. When I'm not in the mood for sex, I still have sex because I know somewhere in there I'm going to start enjoying it.
It's like, so, and I told him that, and but we have a good relationship. I said, please speak up, because I don't want you to feel that I don't find you attractive, that I don't find you sexy or whatever. I go, it's there, but it's I'm hormonally challenged.
Right.
And I really can't take anything because of family history and stuff. So I'm kind of like screwed.
Right.
Or not screwed. But, it hasn't changed. Like how I view him as a sexual being, I still find him very attractive. And in that way, it's just, I'm challenged.
That's great. And he'll be very happy when he sees this. All right.
And I mean, he knows. I said, whatever you want, just tap me.
That's a beautiful thing. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay. First of all, can I ask the question of the Australian ladies? Is this another Australia versus America? No, this is information. Man. It's information seeking. I'm trying to understand perspective a little bit better.
Yeah, he's also looking up flights to Australia as we speak.
Yeah, there you go. So is the predominant religion in Australia the Catholic one, or I know they have multiple religions, but is that the number one? Is that everybody kind of leans that way?
I would say Christianity, not necessarily maybe Catholicism, but Christianity in general. There's lots of versions of that. There'd be Protestant and Anglican and a whole bunch that have that whole similarity.
Yeah, that's just information seeking. So now going back to your original question about dealing with, do we think that religion and the Bible have predominant role over the moral compass of people in general, and I'm gonna say yes, religion is the biggest skull fuck that we didn't had and for the last 5,000 years. Okay, I
definitely did not see that coming.
Because first of all, let me just say this: religion is man-made. Okay, every religion on the planet is basically a bunch of truths that they have strung together that a group of people will agree with and go along with and say, okay, we're Zuluism, okay? Not to just pick one, but it's enough of them that'll go along with it and say, yes, we're Zuluism, and we believe that tying our shoes from the left to the right is the most powerful religion on the planet. And everybody goes along with that, and and that's what they mutually agree upon. So all of the religions are based on something that can be considered positive, and then the majority of it is just something that they're going to use to try to manipulate and control, because that's what religion is designed to do.
Yeah. And my other issue with basing a 2021 society on the Bible is that this thing was written before people knew what bacteria was or where the sun went at night. Like, let's update things, man. We upgrade our phones, we upgrade our computers. How about we upgrade our understanding of the universe?
Yeah, and
upgrade the legal system while we're at it.
Say that again.
I said, can we upgrade the legal system while we're at it?
Hey, listen, America's number one. We have no problems in the legal system, unless you're a woman or black or poor.
Hello. But
if you're a black woman, you are really at the short end of the stick in the American legal system. Black women, not many people know this because the headlines go to black dudes that are shot, but black women have it worse legally than any other group in America. It's terrifying.
Yeah. So, religion has affected everything, not just relationships, but everything, so, do we need to be set free? Yes. Do we need to have a higher understanding on what people is good for people and not good for religious systems? Because religious systems are going to be self-serving. Mm-hmm. Now, if you just happen to be Baptist, you get to screw all of the single women in the church until they find somebody.
Hey, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah,
gotta look
man.
for a Baptist church nearby. Hallelujah.
Yeah. You know, it's a common thing. You know, all the deacons got girlfriends that go along with their wives, you know, all of those kind of things. And I'm being facetious when I say this, but it happens. It's a commonplace.
I think, because it was some time ago, I think we started this particular conversation or the arms of this conversation talking about identity. I think that's what it was. And with your comment, Chocolate Yoda, about Black women in America being, you know, going through as much as you are, and I don't like to use the word suffering, but maybe it is suffering, not having equal rights, not being heard or seen. And I just, as an Australian, clearly we have Indigenous culture here, but I would really love to hear it directly from you, like what it is on a daily basis that you find is commonalities in your life that wouldn't be for somebody who was white. And I ask this because I've just recently met 3 women from South Sudan who are absolutely amazing women, you know, educated, beautiful. And I met them because they thanked me for being so kind to them and giving them directions. And then I met them out for lunch and they kept thanking me. And I was like, you don't have to keep doing that. But I needed to understand their culture and what they'd been through and their background. So I am classically, I'll put my hand up and say, I'm the white privileged chick, really. I think I'm privileged simply because my skin color is white. I've worked in the Caribbean in places where I've seen firsthand where somebody else has more experience or they can do the job better, but they've picked me purely because I'm white. So I would love to hear more information, more background from you, like from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Well, I have a quick question before the brown folks answer that. What is your idea of white privilege? What does that mean to you?
Okay, all right, that's a fair question. For me, in my experience in Australia and when I've traveled, for me, white privilege is having the opportunity to be exposed to certain education areas that weren't available at the time when I was younger anyway, to people who weren't of white color. That's changed, but that's how that was. The fact that I am white, it's kind of like I get to go to the front of the line all the time, even when I'm not choosing to go to the front of the line, when I'm more than happy to stay and wait my turn. That I've always been heard. Yeah. Whether I wanted to be heard or not, I've been heard.
Right. And all of the things you said are definitely a big part of it. For me, part of how I explain white privilege, because I get private messages all the time on Facebook whenever these, you know, social issues happen, and it's my white friends, you know, trying to get my perspective on it. And I appreciate that they're asking me. And the way I explain it is what doesn't happen. So a good example is when you get pulled over in a car. Now, for white people, and this is based on what white people have told me, like what that incident is for them, it's, you know, you get annoyed. Oh man, I'm going to be late to where I was going, something like that. Or you think, oh, I don't want another ticket, or I can't get another point on my license. You know, it's mostly around inconvenience and annoyance. And what I've never heard a white person say is they were worried and fearful that this could be the last few minutes of their life. That's something that doesn't happen to white people, and it happens to Black and brown people. And that's part of what privilege is. Everything you said, plus the stuff that you never have to experience.
Yeah. And I'm not going to pretend that I have even an eighth or an inkling of understanding about that, because I also live, or we also live, in a predominantly white culture that is still screwed up in certain areas with Indigenous people. And Janelle, I mean, you don't mind me mentioning your kids? No. So Janelle's previous husband was Black American.
I bet he still is.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he's still black, yes.
So she has what I call gorgeous caramel children.
Right.
And I've never actually asked you either in Australia whether they've experienced any challenges with that. So I'm really love to get feedback from you, Laura, and you, Janelle, if there's anything there you wish to share.
Sure. I'll go first. So I grew up in what I would call Black privilege. Grew up, my grandfather was a dentist on my mom's side of the family. My grandmother was a school teacher. And she was one of the first of 3 women to graduate from Southern University in Louisiana. I've had a lot of the rights and privileges that a lot of folks in the US take for granted in terms of schooling, education, etc. However, when it comes to areas of employment, sometimes it doesn't matter how qualified you are, that you have an Ivy League education. Sometimes those opportunities are not there for you. The other thing that a lot of people don't have the experience of, having, you know, grown up with Black family, you worry whether people are going to make it home at night. You know, my nephews are, one of them is at Morehouse College, a historically Black college for men. And he's in Atlanta, Georgia. With all the upheaval that's happening in Georgia now, not that Georgia has ever been a great place outside of Atlanta and a few other places for Black folk, I'm concerned. When January 6th happened, before he went down for his technically first semester there as a freshman, because the first semester actually was done online, you know, I was concerned. All of us were. When the inauguration happened on January 20th, we were concerned. There was word that Trump was saying, you know, he sent out some words, let's bag some bodies in Georgia. He was specifically talking about those Blacks who had been part of the changing of the state from red to blue. He specifically, there's a death threat that Stacey Abrams is under right now, and she will probably be under for the rest of her life. So when it comes to owning space, being in spaces of privilege, done that, no problem. Code switch, I can do all of that. My family does it as well.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. Does everybody know what code switch means?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt, and thank you for asking the question. Yeah. As I was thinking, as in switching from Black code to white code.
Sort of.
You know?
Go ahead, Laura.
Or cultural. It's cultural. Yeah. Depends on where you are, but yeah. And I'm not necessarily even talking Ebonics either. I mean, I can speak Ebonics, but they're just things, ways that you talk amongst your family and friends that you would not talk, you would not speak, or even topics that you would not talk about in front of other folks. Right. That may not be the same race or the same culture, ethnicity, you know, et cetera. Yeah. But the reality is there is a palpable fear of folks not coming home, folks being stopped by police. My oldest nephew has a Mercedes. My brother purchased that for him. And I'm just like, dude, why? You know, it's got slightly tinted windows. And the fact that he can't, you know, not that he can't, because he has it, but because that comes with extra fear. But the reality is it's no greater fear than if he drove a Chevy Malibu, you know, up and down the streets of Chicago. The fear is there. It's a fear of the police. It's a fear of other folks who may, you know, carjacking. Chicago, steep with carjacking. And it's not even that I'm worried about my nephew, because he's in Atlanta now, my oldest nephew, but my mom, you know, she's 80 years old. She still lives very independently, but with all the carjacking and this, that, and the other happening, and not saying that all Blacks are targeted for carjacking by any stretch of the imagination, because it's happening all over the city of Chicago in all areas. But the reality is, when you see something like that happen to George Floyd, when you understand what happened to Breonna Taylor, when you see things that happened to that older Indian guy who's just walking in his neighborhood and he was roughed up by police, when you see children who go to pool parties with their friends, you know, middle class Black folks, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how much education you make.
Well, because nobody sees that. The only thing that people see is the color of your skin.
Right. And that
Diane will remember that, you know, we went to high school together. I was the lone pepper in the sea of salt, right? And I didn't realize it then, but high school became, well, junior high school and high school became a microcosm for what America is. And that is, for Black and brown people, it's being in enemy territory all the time. That's really how you feel. You know, I know for a fact that for years I carried PTSD from the racism that I experienced as a child. And, you know, and as a whole, that's what goes on in America. If your skin is dark, you understand that you're in a country that actively hates you. And that is, and you know, as an adult, that's not how I go into the world, but I do understand that as the truth.
And let me say one other thing. You are hyper visible and invisible at the same time. You are seen and you are unseen. And that's actually the same way that you're treated for me, that plus size people are treated universally as well. I shouldn't say universally, because
that's right. Don't say universally, because you know I see you, baby.
Stop. Okay, stop. But the reality, and I want to go back to what you all talked about in terms of normal. I had a guest on my show this week, and I did word association with her. And when I said the word plus size, she said normal. Black, normal. It's just normal to us. Living, being a human being is normal. To other people, it's abnormal. And I think that's the problem.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, Ron, any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, there's definitely a divide on what we live and what people see and think about how we live. There's a big divide. And I think the divide is even harder to get an understanding when it's, you know, having the privilege to have gone to different places, different continents, different countries. You know, what your norm in Australia, even though you have indigenous people there, they're not extinct, okay? You know, they still coexist in some form or fashion. In the United States, the original indigenous people of this country are extinct. You know, there are a great many of the tribes that were here originally don't exist anymore. There's just a very small number of tribes that exist. So we have been under the threat of extinction for a very long time. You know, they brought us to this country and we are still under the threat of becoming extinct, because they try, not everyone, but many try to keep us either mentally or physically or any kind of way they can, you know, successfully achieve to oppress us. And they're going to continue to do that because they're not trying to change. It is their way of life that they want to see us oppressed.
And it's going to get worse.
That's what I'm saying. And they're not trying to change it.
Yeah.
They don't want to change it. They're not looking to change it, you know? So yes, we may have made some achievements, but they don't acknowledge our achievements. You know, we were talking about money and money and privilege a little while ago, what you were saying. And I thought about a situation that happened to someone that everybody across the world is familiar with. And that's Oprah Winfrey. Mm-hmm. You know, you're talking about one of the top 10 money-making women in the world. Now, she went to a women's store and I can't remember exactly where she was. I think it was in California or maybe even overseas. And when she went there, they didn't recognize who she was. And they literally disrespected her to the point by telling her, you can't afford anything in this, store, lady.
Yeah, that was Hermes.
That was from where?
Hermes. That's Hermes. I don't know how you say it. Hermes,
okay.
Hermes.
Yeah. And they literally disrespected her. So when they found out that this woman could buy and sell the whole chain, then their attitude changed towards her. Yeah. But they didn't see.
Yeah, the CEO went on her show via telephone and like begged for his life pretty much.
So they saw color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they approached her from a perspective is that you cannot afford anything. They made an assumption immediately based off of her, and she wasn't made up in her, show makeup or anything like that. She was out shopping.
Yeah.
And they disrespected this woman to the point where you can't afford anything in this show, in this store.
Yeah.
So, those type of assumptions exist constantly, even more prevalent in the United States than in other places too, but it's even more prevalent.
Gotcha.
I'm just going to say one thing and just clarify something. And when I said it's getting worse, is that there are times in history where population changes, okay? The demographics change. In the United States, every time there's a population shift, there are more Blacks in the country. When we talk about enslaved Africans being brought over, at some point, we outnumbered those Europeans who were here. At that point, immigration opened up. You had Irish coming in. They were then deemed white because at one point in Europe, they were not thought of as white people.
No.
And so they were not classified as that. However, there's the system of privilege that developed. And so they were brought over. They were, of course, in the hierarchy, they were under land-owning men, gentry, if you will. They were under them, but they were on top of us. And somewhere in the middle are the Native Americans, okay? But every time there's a shift, and we're going through one right now. Let me back up. Reconstruction in the 1800s. Lots of laws changed to control Black movement, Black economics, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever there's growth or economic development at our own hands for our own community, it's destroyed. I mean, there's so many examples of that. There's Greenwood in Tulsa, in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's Florida, there's this, there's that and the other, Illinois, et cetera. However, right now, again, we're going through population change where white folks are deemed to be the minority. Was it by 2042?
Somewhere around there, between 2040 and 2050.
Exactly. So there's another call for immigration, folks. We've heard this during 45's presidency. A call. Why don't we have folks immigrate from Sweden? Why don't we have folks? And we're going to eliminate the number of folks who can come from those shithole countries, if you will. So,
quote, unquote.
Well, yeah. So there's when there's a shift and there's a fear of being outnumbered, not outgunned, that's for sure. But like South Africa, where the majority of people are Black, who controls the economics? The white South Africans do. And that's the same, it will always be here in the United States. They will control the economy, and then there will also be a shift to control Black bodies. And that's what we're going through. And it's cyclical. And it almost never stops. But you can see the rise of the tide, the ebb and flow of this country, and why these killings, these recent killings of folks, besides cell phone videos, because we've always said it's been happening, people haven't believed it, but now there's evidence. It makes it a harder pill to swallow.
Right.
So this is just the way it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
so we answered the hell out of that, I think.
Yeah.
What I love about this podcast is that we can go everywhere. And, you know, I have no problems with any direction that conversation goes in. It's intelligent. It's necessary. So I am very glad that all of you participated in this. Thank you so much. You know, I believe, like, just to give you an idea of how conversations go all over the place, I had like 15 questions written down. I asked 2 of them. All right. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. So we'll wrap it up. I have a feeling that we'll want to do this again because we've got so much more to talk about. You know, we've got cultural stuff, we've got gender stuff, we've got relationship stuff, gender roles. We can keep talking and talking, you know, next month, the month after, whatever it is. I'm happy to keep doing this because I love this dynamic. I love what you all bring to the table. And, you know, let's decide when we're going to do it again. All right. So for now, thank you all. I appreciate, you know, your participation, and have a great time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.